Sup, you beautiful bastards. Welcome back to the DeFranco Show. It is Sunday, May 21st, and today we're blessing you with two videos. This first one that you made the very educated decision on clicking, and right after today's show, it'll be one of the top links down below. Go to youtube.com/@ZTabani, because our guy Zed got something extra special for you today. But with that said, let's just jump into it. Starting with WeBuyUglyHouses. Maybe you've seen the billboards, the ads, sometimes featuring a little cartoon caveman holding bags of money. They're Homevestors of America's franchise company. In fact, they've got 1,150 different franchises across 48 states, and the general sentiment is always the same. We'll buy your property in cash at a discount and you get out of an ugly situation. But according to a new bombshell report from ProPublica, the real ugly situation here is the way that so many of the franchise owners target elderly, infirm, and desperate homeowners with exploitative and manipulative business practices, as well as the way that Homevestors actually trains them to do so. With their investigation finding that Homevestors teaches their franchise owners how to target the most vulnerable homeowners looking to sell. Their training manual instructing them to build relationships with people who closely interact with those in difficult situations, or people like divorce attorneys, nursing home staff, probate officers, training them to even comb neighborhoods looking for signs of desperation, boarded up windows, shut off notices, and police tape, even saying, quote, quickly pursue the property where the trash pile indicates eviction. And a former employee of an ad agency that has worked with Homevestors saying they actively work to serve digital ads to people in nursing homes, or people who might take any amount of just incredibly low offers on their house to help cover their nursing home costs. With a former employee even saying that the owner bragged about the ability for ads to find an elderly person who had just broken their hip, and calling the injury a 60-day countdown to death and a deal. The training manual even instructing franchisees to, quote, find the pain of their sellers, saying pain is always a form of motivation. Once you find the seller's pain, you have a much better chance of buying the house. And understand, that's just the official training. Some of the franchise owners take their methods even further. And even all that's just how they get their foot in the door. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Once they're actually in, it gets even worse, with ProPublica's investigation identifying several franchise owners that straight up lied to get properties from vulnerable people. One reported example being Cory Evans with Patriot Holdings, with him reportedly telling a 72-year-old woman suffering from a hoarding problem that if she didn't sell to him, city officials would come with trucks to take her things and house. A social worker then later coming to the woman's home, disproving Evans's claims and offering the woman assistance. And with her now knowing the truth, she tried to back out of the deal with Evans, but then he sued her for breach of contract. Another reported example was that of Jason Ellingson of J Corp. He reportedly told a woman that her house was in such disrepair that it needed to be torn down so he could only offer her $10,000, notably just a fifth of its value, with the seller then telling ProPublica, he basically convinced me it was a piece of shit. In my heart, I knew I was getting totally screwed, but I took the deal. With J Corp reportedly then going on to sell the house 6 months later for $55,000 with no repairs done. But it isn't just lying. Some franchise owners have just taken advantage of those who don't have the mental capacity to understand what they're signing. With Evans from Patriot Holdings reportedly pushing an 82-year-old woman with dementia into a contract for 2/3 of the house's value. And all that resulting in a years-long legal battle with her son trying to back out of the deal because his mother has dementia. Or for example, in 2020, you had a 78-year-old man who was unable to write a sentence or even name the year, being convinced to sell his home for half of what it was worth. And so, of course, it brings up the question, well, what happens when these people realize they're getting screwed? Well, in many cases, franchise owners take them to court or use the bureaucratic system to stop the owners from selling to anyone else, something called clouding a title, which notably locks sellers into either a deal they do not want or an extensive legal battle. ProPublica finding more than 50 franchisees clouding titles or suing for breach of contract, and even noting that number might actually be too low because many disputes are just settled in private arbitration. And also finding that one of Homevestors' top performing franchisees was found to have filed 24 breach of contract lawsuits since 2016 and clouded titles on over 300 properties, which is also why you have real estate experts saying the sheer volume of the lawsuits and title notices filed by Homevestors franchises show just how predatory their business practices are. Now, with this, as far as the other side, you had Homevestors quick to offer an explanation or justification for just about everything ProPublica asked them about, arguing that they educated their franchisees to be transparent about being a discount buyer and expressly prohibit lying in the handbook, and going on to say such methods are not tolerated and lead to, quote, swift action up to and including termination of a franchise. However, they also didn't say how many franchises have been terminated for this behavior, and ProPublica even reporting that the company had given awards to 8 franchise owners in 2 years who had engaged in those practices. Homevestors also vehemently denied targeting based on devastating life events, but when ProPublica showed the receipts, they backpedaled, saying that it was only a fraction of their marketing budget. They also denied targeting demographics based on age, pointing to an internally calculated approval rating of 96% of homeowners, claiming that was calculated from over 500 customer reviews, and saying since ProPublica reached out to them, they have since taken some action against accused franchise owners and open investigations into others based on ProPublica's report. As well as within a few days of receiving the questions, they also prohibited franchise owners from clouding titles and discouraged them from suing sellers, saying that it creates a paper trail that leads prosecutors and reporters to the doorstep. And that also appears to be true because outside of even this report, Evans of Patriot Holding, who we were talking about, he was charged with 2 counts of felony attempted grand theft of real estate property and pleaded guilty in August of 2020, with him being prohibited from buying or selling real estate during his probation. To which most might say, well, Homevestors should have terminated the Patriot Holding franchise following his conviction, but, fun little thing, he's one of their highest earners. So instead what happened is Evans was removed as an owner of Patriot Holdings, a business he owned with his 3 brothers and a partner, but he was still included on an award that they received in 2021. And so with this, whenever we cover a topic like this, of course, I'm going to link down below so you can dive in even further. With this story, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts in general, but especially if you or someone you know has had some dealings with home investors franchises or anything that seems predatory like this. And then I gotta give a major shout out to the sponsor of today's show, eBoost. I was just tired of the cheap and synthetic ingredients from other energy drinks, and I was really impressed when I came across Superfuel from eBoost. Superfuel has way better ingredients, plus the natural caffeine has been the perfect amount to get me through midday slumps without the jitters. It's sweetened with honey and fortified with 10 essential vitamins and minerals, nootropics, electrolytes, and antioxidants, and was voted best energy drink of 2021 by Eat This Not That. It's got no artificial colors or sweeteners, and it's great for everyone. Whether you want everyday energy, you're working late, have jet lag, or a pre-workout boost. And did I mention that each can only has 1 to 2 grams of sugar and 15 calories or less per can. Blue raspberry and strawberry lemonade have been my favorites. The flavor's so smooth, the carbonation just right, but honestly, you can't go wrong with any of them. So just go to eboost.com/DeFranco-BOGO. Use my code DeFranco to BOGO. Buy one, get one. You buy 1 pack of Superfuel, you get 1 free. And this BOGO deal never happens and is their best deal ever, so grab it now. And then there's this constantly developing situation around what's being done to combat deepfake porn. It's an issue that's made a lot of headlines over the past few months, more and more as days go by. And you may have seen it impacting online creators, celebrities, some victims powerfully condemning how violating it can be to be abused in this way. But also the scary reality is that it can impact anyone, and regular everyday people are increasingly the ones that are becoming the victims. And with the technology constantly advancing both in the quality of the final product as well as the barrier of entry to do this being so incredibly low, it's a problem that's only going to grow. And so in an effort to understand the roots of all this and what options victims actually have, we spoke to Adam Dodge. He's the founder of NTAB, Ending Tech-Enabled Abuse, with their aim being to fight online abuse and give communities resources to prevent it. And we also talked to Noelle Martin, a global activist and researcher at the University of Western Australia's Tech and Policy Lab, who was actually a victim of synthetic image abuse herself. Right? Because what many people may not realize when discussing AI and deepfakes is just how pervasive the porn aspect is specifically. Where many discuss the misinformation aspect of deepfakes, and that's all well and fair, right? It is a legitimate concern. But according to Sensity AI, between 90 and 95% of deepfakes are just non-consensual porn, and 90% of that content depicts women. And as it often goes, the system is actively built against people that are fighting against it. Right? While most states now have revenge porn laws, only a few specifically address deepfakes. With Adam Dodge explaining that even in states that do have deepfake laws, they're just not effective.
You're talking about a form of abuse that law enforcement is unfamiliar with, that courts are unfamiliar with. We could have perfect deepfake laws and still have trouble enforcing them because unmasking people doing anonymous things online, especially in other states or other countries, is really difficult.
Right, because the person creating those images may not even be on the same continent as the victim, which is also why Noelle Martin said that for any response to actually be effective, this has to be a worldwide effort.
This is a global issue that I believe could only be meaningfully addressed with a collaborative, coordinated global response. And how that will work will be something that we're going to have to figure out over time. But it has to be some sort of global response because currently it is not okay for someone halfway around the world to ruin another person's life forever.
And when she says ruin a person's life forever, she's not kidding around. Again, she knows firsthand how devastating this form of abuse is. Her victims have absolute horror stories of this, with MIT's technology review noting that some have had to change their names or try to entirely remove any trace of themselves from the internet, which I mean is just incredibly difficult. We constantly talk about how the internet's forever. With all of this, of course, resulting in a lot of people going, well, someone's got to do something. But in Martin's experience, it's easier said than done to get lawmakers to take any action, especially since so many are operating on a limited understanding of the scope of all this. I mean, fuck, do you remember the TikTok hearings? Right, that was just one of the latest examples, at least here in the States, of our leaders not understanding technology one fucking bit.
Mr. Chu, does TikTok access the home Wi-Fi network?
Only if the user turns on the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, I may not understand the...
So if I have TikTok app on my phone and my phone is on my home Wi-Fi network, does TikTok access that network?
Right, we gotta hope that mouth breather understands how deepfakes work, but also even the ones who do aren't necessarily jumping to solve this problem.
There's a lack of political will to address it. And there's just a lack of listening. And when you don't have lawmakers and policymakers listening to people and hearing what they need, then we're not going to see anything.
But thankfully, there are people trying to work to help the victims, both with what's available to them now and fighting to give them more options further down the road. Which, regarding where victims can start, Dodge noted that you basically have to come at it from a defensive perspective, just starting with taking down the images and videos that have been posted. But that's also something that many victims have found nearly impossible to permanently accomplish, with Dodge explaining that this effort requires being constantly proactive, checking every day, but also noting there are tools out there to help.
Some websites have specific portals where you can request to have those taken down. Google will de-index those websites from search so we can make it harder for people to find those images. And so there's different things that we can do there. And then to the best we can, we want to try to hold the person who has created them and who has disseminated them accountable. So, which can be more challenging, but that doesn't mean we don't try. It's important to set expectations appropriately, that it's hard to hold people accountable online for stuff they do anonymous.
And actually, in this line of thinking, you had the likes of Scarlett Johansson speaking out, where she's been a victim of deepfake porn, and she said in her case, she found combating the content to be a useless pursuit. And explaining to the Washington Post, the fact is that trying to protect yourself from the internet and its depravity is basically a lost cause for the most part. Even if you copyright pictures with your image that belong to you, the same copyright laws don't apply overseas. And adding, I've sadly been down this road many, many times. But for Martin, this bleak situation is why she started speaking out in the first place, by saying when she found out that these kinds of videos were being made of her, it felt like her only choice.
So I needed to reclaim my name, and this was the only way I could do it. And I also knew that I wasn't the only one this was happening to, that there were many people who were the targets of this abuse, and it wasn't dominating discussion like it is today.
And it's been a long, sometimes turbulent journey as she started speaking out and becoming an activist on this subject. More and more videos were made of her, but thankfully she has seen progress. The first state in Australia to make non-consensual pornography like this illegal was New South Wales, and the Australian Broadcasting Corporation described Martin as the face of the advocacy for those laws. And so when there was legislative change that she helped bring forward, that was rewarding.
It felt very surreal. It felt amazing, actually, to be able to have that public condemnation of this abuse and to almost have that sense of validation that people were getting it.
But even with as massive as this is, like we mentioned earlier, she doesn't see this as the end, right? No single law can fix this.
It's becoming more and more clear that there are serious gaps and that any jurisdiction around the world is limited in what it can do. Just because we have laws doesn't mean they're working, but we are seeing, I guess, a sense of complacency about this issue and how we can constantly address it, because it needs to be constantly addressed over time as we see technology advancing and this issue evolving.
And so Dodge said he doesn't necessarily see new legislation as the answer, or the fact that it's hard to get politicians to act aside. He just thinks that there are more effective routes, with one of them being taking aim at the platforms that host this content.
One playbook that we like is financial pressure. So instead of pursuing civil action or criminal action against them, go after their advertisers, go after the payment processors that they use. If you take away their ability to earn money from these platforms, that's like what they did with Pornhub to get non-consensual pornography and child sexual exploitative material off those platforms. All the advertisers, the payment processors said, we're out until you fix this problem. And that money talks.
And with all that, also noting that another approach is just viewing this as a form of abuse that the public and law enforcement are already familiar with and equipped to handle.
What I want to see us do as a society is instead treat deepfake pornography like the crime that it is. It can be harassment. It can be a form of stalking. It can be a form of false impersonations. These are not new ways to abuse people. It's still power and control. It's still trying to humiliate somebody or violate their privacy. They're just using new technologies and tech platforms to do that.
But for now, that's where we're going to stop. We're going to pause, because there are a lot of different angles and ways to frame this story, and I want to keep covering it because it is something that's going to just impact more and more people moving forward. But in the meantime, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts, your experiences, any of that relating to this story. But no matter what, thank you for being a part of this special Sunday show. Of course, I have a whole week of news ready for you this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with your regular Philip DeFranco show. So I'll leave you as always. My name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.